We are going live in a minute here.
Countdown.
Okay, I think we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my series on all the good, bad, and ugly when it comes to writing for your business. I am Joanne Homestead, the founder of Despant Creatives. I am an email copywriter, copy coach, and obsessed storyteller. And I help my clients elevate their stories to really connect, compel, and soulfully sell with audacious authenticity. So I have a guest on today, Rachel Lee, and I'm so excited to have her on. She is an artist, designer, and brand stylist who helps disruptive brands and neurospicy entrepreneurs. I love that. Find the sparkle in their brand and develop a unique look that looks just as loud as their personality. And you can just tell already from Rachel's background, like, yes, that totally fits her brand. And so, Rachel, thank you for coming on today to have a live chat with me.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to jam out with you today.
Yeah. So I I'm excited for our conversation today because you are very much into right now, like the visual branding, creating the visuals, a lot of that artistic visual neurospiciness look. I like that. And
Thank you.
and so I'd love to hear your perspective on writing for your business. I know you had just done some rewriting of your web copy, I believe, for your business with kind of your little rebrand that you did. Not little, I'm sorry, with your big rebrand that you did. I'd love to hear more about that.
Absolutely. And honestly, in hindsight, I made a big deal about the rebrand. It's actually a very small adjustment, but I think when it comes to copy, even the smallest adjustment could garner hours and hours and hours of writing. And I honestly, I had a lot of fun with it, but it's a very time intensive process where when I was knowing that I needed to make an adjustment to my brand, I had this moment of dread knowing that I would need to update every single word on my website, and it was no small undertaking. And but I was also looking forward to it because I knew that what I had on it before wasn't a good representation of me. It's kind of like when you look back at your old high school pictures and you're like, oh, thank God that's not me anymore.
Yes.
That's the feeling that I had when I looked at my old website. I was like, oh, thank God, I'm ready to move on from this. And even though I knew it was going to be a really big undertaking, I was excited in a sense to work on my website, because for me, whenever I work on the copy for anything in my business, I kind of treat it just like an extended journaling exercise. I think it might be because I run with a personal brand and I want it to feel more like it's self expressive. I want it to sound like me. So I try to make it fun, but I know in the past that hasn't been the case. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that in the rest of our
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. I know. I love what you're saying about it's it w- our business is continually evolving as entrepreneurs and
Mm.
as personal brands, we are evolving, which means our brand evolves. And so that kind of what speaks to what you're saying about your copywriting and the words that you have representing you will need to be changed and tweaked. And yeah, that can definitely feel like you look at it and you go, yeah, that's like the high school picture I don't ever want to see again. For me, it was the perm of 2001 that I never want to see. I think there was one picture of it, and I'm pretty sure I cut it up and burned it up. I was like, no.
Burn it with fire.
Yes. And so I kind of like what you were saying about approaching it like journaling. I was wondering if you could tell us more about that.
Yeah, I feel like, for context, in the past, whenever I wrote any sort of copy for my business, I had the business hat on, and I had a lot of, I was always triangulating in my head and trying to find the most strategic and tactical way to communicate things. And it was very left brain. It was very much asking myself the question of, okay, I'm trying to achieve this thing. What's the best way for me to word it from a marketing and sales perspective? And how do I use fancy words to make it sound like I'm important? And all of those things.
Power words.
Power words, and it felt so much like homework that I
Mm.
didn't have fun with it. So when I switched over to a personal brand, knowing that my intention was to bring more of me into my content, I knew that I needed to really rework the way that I wrote. And it actually took a lot of time for me to rewire that circuit in my brain. And I think the best way that I was able to do it was actually just to actually say things out loud, like literally run it out loud through my mouth and then hear myself saying it and then ask myself, does this sound like me or does this sound like what I think other people want to hear? And
Mhm.
there's like a huge difference in that. Part of the reason why I started my podcast a year and a half back is because I wanted it to help me with the flow of communication and to find my voice and get used to it. And I feel like me doing the podcast sort of informed the way that I wrote. And the more that I wrote, in the beginning, it was kind of, it didn't feel smooth. It was kind of crunchy and chunky and chunky writing. I don't know
I'm
how
like,
else
that
to
sounds
say
like a
it.
really yummy peanut butter granola that I'm hearing.
I wish it was that delicious, but there were many moments where, as I think, as I was trying to find my voice, where some sentences would sound kind of like me, but then I would slip into like the formal professional jargon, and you would have this zombie mishmash of copy, even in like an email, right? Like
Yeah.
I know that when you communicate through words, it's with the lens of I'm communicating to somebody. And I think I had to rewire a lot of circuits into my brain to be like, well, I should say the same things to people in the same tone, same language, same everything, regardless of who I'm talking to, because I shouldn't be changing myself based on who it is that I'm talking to or the situation that I'm in. Otherwise, I would be going through an identity crisis every time I'm talking to somebody. And I don't think my copy should be like that. So when I
Yeah.
wanted to make it easier and fun for me, I decided to use it as like a, almost like a journaling exercise where I'm like, everything that I say is gonna just come straight from the heart. And I had to get used to and be okay with it being messy and not having people get me. And there were a lot of things that came up as I started leaning more into it. But in hindsight, I'm happy I made that decision because writing copy is really fun for me now and I actually enjoy it a lot more.
Oh, that's awesome. I love hearing that journey that you went through, going from like, it feels like a very big rock in the way kind of feeling,
Yeah.
and then going through it in a way that you brought your strengths in. Are you like a verbal processor?
The weird thing is, I'm not. I actually like to write. I started off with a blog first, and
Yeah.
I think for the longest time, I was scared of hearing my own voice. I think it's
Mhm.
like the threshold before you decide to see yourself on camera. It's like, okay, let me get used to the sound of my voice first, and then
Yeah.
I'm okay seeing myself being recorded. And there are still
Yeah.
times where I'm like, I know that was a fantastic recording that I did, but I don't want to watch
Right. Yes.
it.
Yeah,
We just
That's
feel
me
like
every
allergic
day.
to seeing ourselves.
Yes.
But I feel like when it comes to writing, I wanted to make it smoother, and it was almost like I needed to hear myself say it back to myself before
Hmm.
I could discover what that voice is, because sometimes when you write, the voice is different, like,
Hmm.
and I feel like I go through a mini identity crisis every time I write for my business because I'm like, do I sound like that? I'm like, is that a little, that's edgy, is that too edgy, am I trying to be cool right now? And
You're
I
like
find
you're
myself
dissecting. You're just totally going into dissecting. I think that's kind of what you're
yeah,
talking about with and I see this with my clients too, who
yeah.
my copy coaching program is that sometimes they get stuck because they're so in like the strategy mode. Like, what's
Mm.
the strategic thing here? What does my audience want to hear? What are they thinking? And what do I have to say so that it resonates? And instead of going from like, okay, this is the strategy I need to do. This is what I have to keep the audience in mind. It's like, no, just almost like what you're saying. It's like journaling, like write from your heart. What do you
Yeah.
want to say? What is it that's coming out of your heart that you want to say? And then write
Yeah.
it down. And then from there, what you can do is you can then look at it more strategically and say, like, okay, so I really want to focus on I really want to focus on this one key takeaway because that's going to align
Mhm.
with my offer and things like that. And then you can
Yeah.
just you can go through it that way. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate how you brought up about, just you just end up in this circle of thinking about the strategy and all that. And I love how you said like you approached it like journaling. And that's so interesting. I
Yeah.
think what you said about listening to
Mm.
yourself speaking because what that's exactly what I do for my clients who do my done for you email sequence is
Yeah.
I go and I listen to whatever content they have out there. It could be audio, video, it could just be us getting on a call together. And I am listening very intentionally how they speak, what words they use, what phrases they use, like the tone they use, and then translate it
Wow.
into writing. And I feel like that's what you did is like you did it for yourself because sometimes it's hard like you're in your head. And if you can
Mm.
just get yourself out and listen to yourself, then you kind of provide this space. You kind of take a step back and go, oh, like, oh, I use that. Like, oh, that's a word I use pretty commonly. Okay, I could like put that in my writing.
Absolutely. And I think it's actually a fun exercise because that's how I've come to really enjoy writing because as I read my writing, and sometimes one thing that I like to do is I'll write a piece of copy, and after I go through the multiple drafts and tweak it until I'm happy with it, the final pass through that I usually do, I actually read it out loud so I can hear myself saying it. And I usually run it through that filter of, is this something I would actually say? And it usually checks out where even one of the mannerisms that I realize that I usually have is between every sentence, I usually have some sort of aside, like a small little side thought that you would put in
Like a
brackets.
parentheses.
Yeah, exactly. And I've had a lot of fun incorporating that into my social posts, into my newsletters. And I've had that feedback from other people where after they read my writing, they're like, Rachel, this is exactly how you talk. And I have like emojis everywhere too, because usually when I talk, I'm also very expressive. So I've had the feedback. And I try to incorporate that into my writing as well, because the emojis is the closest I can come to visual representation within text outside of trying to really communicate tone using the right words. And there's actually still cool things that you can do within copy that convey emotions, like lots of dots to create pauses or extra line breaks to help with the flow. Like there's a lot of things that I've been exploring when it comes to writing content to make it feel more dynamic instead of like full sentence paragraphs, full sentence paragraphs, full sentence paragraphs. Like we don't talk like that. So why should
Yeah.
I write like that?
Yeah,
Right?
we don't speak in 5 paragraph formats with the intro and
No,
conclusion and our three
absolutely
sub
not.
points and all that. Yeah, that's true. I like what you're saying about like the formatting and playing with the formatting, playing with emojis, playing with those things that sometimes people are focused on the words, but you can definitely play with that to get kind of like your tone. And that
Yeah.
okay, that kind of brings me to when we're talking about copywriting for your business, there's a lot of different kinds of copywriting that you do for your business. We're talking about
Mm.
like website copywriting. And as a copywriter myself, website copywriting honestly is not my favorite place to be. Yeah. The website
Yeah.
copywriting is a little different, it's almost like a little like you gotta have little snacks here and there. And I like
Mm.
the long form writing. And so that's why I love email because it's a bit to me, it's a bit more long form. It's a little more storytelling. It's more like
Mm.
conversational in a different way than website copywriting is. So I kind of want to ask you, what kind of copywriting do you like to do in your business? Is there one that you feel more that resonates more with you?
I personally like writing content a lot more. You're right about the website where somehow there also just feels like so much pressure because when you write it, it lives on your website forever. I know I could absolutely change it in a second, but there's some level of permanency to it that could feel really intimidating. Like it's so official, it's on a website.
Yeah.
But what I find is that I actually really enjoy writing content. So, like the captions for my posts, the copy in my newsletter, which I should be more consistent with, but I have a lot of fun with it because I feel like every time I sit down to write a piece of content, I'm actually just talking to one of my best friends. And I like to have that just in the back of my mind as I say things. And sometimes, even for me, content can be as short as making a post in my stories. And I try to even implement this storytelling tactic where every slide that I have in my stories connects to each other. And I say it as if it's like a full narrative. So I'll say one statement in like story block one. It's like, hey guys, had an amazing day, went out for a walk, and it was a bit of a crazy day. The next story would be like, because I had a whole bunch of calls and but with amazing people. And then the next slide would be, and I wanted to give a shout out to XYZ for showing up fully in our conference. So every piece, every block in my story connects to each other. And even though it's literally like one sentence caption per story, I still feel like that's copywriting, and there's so much room for even injecting personality into that one sentence where it's
Mhm.
not just about delivering information, it's communicating emotion. And I have a lot of fun saying stuff in my stories like, OMG, it was so freaking cold today. And like, and that is just a simple statement, but you could get so much information from the way that I write that, the
Yeah.
tone, the attitude, the whiny little
Yes.
girl that doesn't like being cold, like all of those things. I want to communicate that. So I find that I actually have a lot of fun even with the shorter snippets. And sometimes it's a little challenge for me to be like, okay, I know what I want to say, but how do I want to say it? How do I make this fun? So every little story block that people go through, it's like a little zinger and people
Yeah.
get something from it. So yeah, I have a lot of fun with that.
Yes, no, I love I love that example and how you're saying like how do I make this fun? Like that the way that you approach it is like, okay, how, and it's almost like a challenge. Like, okay, how can I take like 4 words and make it fun? It kind of reminds me of the 6 word memoir. Have you heard of that?
No, tell me more.
Oh, you're gonna love this. Basically, you can Google it. Anyone listening in, you can Google this 6 word memoir. And basically, what you're trying to do is say something that reflects your life in 6 words. That's what you get. And
Whoa.
if you go to my website and you go to my About Me page on my website and you scroll down, I have all my 6 word memoirs there. I had learned about it from a memoir class I took in graduate school. And I was just like
Wow.
hooked since then. I'm just like, this is so cool. But there are actually books you can buy out there that have all these 6 word memoirs. And it's so interesting because it's like you get a
Crazy.
tiny window into someone's life and it almost hooks you in because you're curious, like, oh, I want to like I'm trying to think of an
Oh,
example right now that I could give you, but I can't think of any right now. Just Google it. There's some really fascinating 6 word memoirs out there that just make you go, whoa, I want to know more about that. Or like, oh, I totally know what you're talking about, you know? So that just
that's
reminded me
so
of your
cool.
stories.
Yeah. I'll have
Yeah,
to check that out
okay.
later.
Yeah, and I kind of like what you're saying about the copywriting, but also blending in the storytelling too, because what I also like to say about storytelling is it doesn't have to be epic and huge. It could be one sentence. And that's like super props to you if you can tell a story in one sentence. That is like that's power right there. Yeah, a story can be one line. It could just be a one liner. It could be a few paragraphs long. I'm talking
Yeah.
specifically in email format. That's where my brain always goes is an email. And so I appreciate how you brought that up. So I have one last question for you
Yeah.
before we wrap up, and it's about like what works for you in terms of getting into like a writing flow, because I find that learning about everyone has like a different and unique way to get into the flow for writing, specifically for your business. And so I
Mm.
love when people can share about this because I think people get a lot of new ideas like, oh, let me try that, or oh, I hadn't thought of that approach before. So I'd love for you to share what works for you in terms of trying to get in the flow of writing for your business.
Ooh, this is a fun question. I
Mhm.
feel like I approach copy the same way that I approach my art and design. And the creative process is all the same for me. And I like how you bring this up because nobody can just sit in front of their computer and start writing right away or design right away or make art right away. It doesn't work like that. There's this period of marination that needs to
Wouldn't that be
happen
great if it could
before
just
that.
like
I
boom?
wish. I wish, like, people ask me all the time because I basically make things for a living, right? And people always ask me this question. They're like, where do you get your inspiration from? Like, where does, like, you're like, they're like, you just pull these things out of thin air. Like, how does it work? I'm like, you need to get into the mood before you do that. And for me, I find that depending on the headspace and emotional space that I'm coming from before I sit and write, I need to use something to help me reset if I'm like, especially if I had a bad day. The one
Mm,
thing that I have to say is
mhm.
don't write when you have a bad day because your writing is going to carry and under, even if you try your absolute best, you're gonna, after you read it in hindsight, you're gonna feel that anger and upset bubbling beneath the
Oh
surface.
yeah. No,
Doesn't
no, I
serve
totally
anyone.
understand. Yeah, like
Yeah.
the energy infuses into the writing. And it's just not
Mm,
it's not fun trying to force yourself to write
no.
when you're not feeling like you want to write.
Exactly. So one thing that I like to do, especially when I need like a hard reset and I know I'm just not in the right place, I actually like to pull up some of my favorite songs that help me get into the mood where I don't have a specific playlist, but depending on what I'm trying to create, I usually know that there's some song in my library that matches that energy. So I do the same thing when I before I design for a client because every brand is different. It's got a different flavor. And there are some brands that are more aggressive. And if I'm feeling super happy and playful and cheerful, but I need to get into the like that sort of mode, I listen to some like hardcore workout music or like something
Yes.
that has that energy or like rap or some sort of Eminem. So in my mind, I'm like I bring it down. I add a level of chill, a little bit of angst and bite and grit.
Yeah.
Or on the opposite side, if I'm feeling really heavy, but I'm about to write a piece of copy that is supposed to be energetic and uplifting and hopeful and full of sunshine and all of that stuff, I need to listen to some happy music that really like lightens everything up. That's
Yeah.
fun and playful and bouncy. So I feel like music is a really good way to help me get into the groove. Preferably if I'm doing writing, I listen to music without lyrics because that also kind of like messes me up. It's okay when I design where there's lyrics because that's like a
Mhm.
different muscle in my brain. But for copy, if I really need some guide rails, I try my best to find a song that matches the energy of the copy I'm trying to write, but
Mhm.
ideally without words. So it doesn't really mess with my flow.
Yeah, yes. I
Yeah.
can resonate with what you're saying there because as someone who also writes for a lot of different clients with different voices and different personalities, I do the same thing. Is like I gotta find music that matches their personality so I can get into it. And sometimes I like, yes, I'm almost like standing up and just like punching the air, like, ew, like this is what it takes to get into the voice that I'm writing for my client. And so yeah, that's really interesting. I think music is really powerful to kind of set the mood and get the flow
Mm.
going. Okay, so what do you want to leave our listeners with as a point of reflection for their own writing journey for their business?
I would honestly just say have fun with it. The moment that it feels like something you have to do or it's so serious, I think that's when you know that you're not doing it the right way. Because writing, at least in my opinion, should feel like you're expressing something that you're excited about. That is something you're genuinely passionate about. And if it isn't, then find an angle that makes it fun and enjoyable for you. Because at the end of the day, words can communicate a lot of information, but it's not just about that. It's about creating a moment of connection. And I feel like when you really focus on the connection that you're going to create by writing these words, it makes it a lot easier and it makes it a lot more enjoyable. So honestly, I'd say just do your best to make it fun or find a way to have fun with your writing.
Yes, take all the shoulds, crumple it up in an imaginary ball, and throw it out the window.
Or
There's
burn
a
it with
lot of shoulds, so
fire.
you're gonna have to throw a lot of them out. Not probably not just one. There's gonna be numerous shoulds coming up. Yeah, and I just love
Yeah.
how you said that. Just have fun with it. And, I was just thinking someone on a call earlier today said I love to provide so much value when I'm writing my marketing content to my community. But people say, oh, don't give too much value. There's a should that's coming up. There's a should that says, oh, I really shouldn't be. But that's what brings her joy because part of her personality code is bringing that knowledge to people. That's her happy
Mm-hmm.
place. And if that's our happy place, then go and do it and throw that shit out because
Yeah.
you don't need it. If that's your happy place and that's where your joy is, that's where people are going to be resonating because that's where you are in your superpower genius mode. That's where you live and you don't need to think about like, oh, this person does it this way, this person does it that way. So I think that's really
Exactly.
powerful. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being on today, Rachel. Could you let our listeners know how they can find you? Where can they find you? How can they connect with you?
Absolutely. So I do my best to be on most of the main platforms. I feel like my platform of preference is Instagram just because it's very visual, but I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. My handle is basically the same across the board. It's Rachel T.Y. Lee. And you could I'd say just find me on Instagram. And my website is the same if you ever want to come check me out.
Okay, yeah, I can put those links if you want to share it with me in the comments section below, and so we can grab that from you. And is there
Yeah.
anything that you're working on right now that you'd like to share with our listeners at this point?
Yes, actually, I recently just launched a power partner program for my business, which I'm really excited about because with the line of work that I do in the world of marketing and specifically visual branding, there are a lot of other services that my clients really need that I literally just no longer offer. And I'm looking to form strategic partnerships with other awesome people in the world of marketing who don't like touching visual branding with a 10-foot pole, and also vice versa for me, so that we can do a better job for our clients and serve them fully. So I'm basically just in the process of looking for more power partners to join my program, but I'm just really excited about developing this year because it's going to allow me to just focus on my own zone of genius, work with other people who are in their zone of genius, and just do like a freaking amazing job for my clients by like assembling my team of Avengers and just tackling these really big projects together. So that's just something that I'm excited about that I wanted to share.
Yes. Okay. So anyone listening, get connected with Rachel on Instagram or LinkedIn, or find her on her website. And if you're interested in the Power Partner Program, I love the alliteration there.
Thank you.
Definitely get in contact with her. That's awesome. I love how you're partnering together to make the client experience just incredible.
Thank you, Joanne.
So thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for all the listeners today. And definitely connect with Rachel, and we will chat later.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today.
Sure.